All right, so thank you for tuning in to Chomping at the Bit. This is episode 15. And in this episode, I mean, what else is there to talk about but the NBA Finals, which do get started on Wednesday night. So I'm going to dive into the matchup between the Heat and the Lakers. I'm going to give you my keys for Miami, my keys for the Lakers, and then by the end of the episode, I will give you my prediction. But before I do get into that, I do want to say, shout out to Mark Cuban. I don't know if any of you have heard the story about Delonte West, but there was a picture that surfaced, I want to say a few days ago, of him, I guess out in the street, out in Houston, I believe. And, you know, kind of made his way around the NBA circles, and, you know, a lot of players who do know Delonte West are trying to reach out to him. And, you know, Mark Cuban actually went to go get him and then took him to his mom. And Mark Cuban's also paying for his rehab. So just want to say shout out to Mark Cuban for that. But then also, before I get into the NBA, there was a story out of the WNBA that I felt like I just had to talk about real quick. So WNBA has been going on in the bubble down in Florida, just like the NBA. They released their all WNBA teams, and they're all defensive teams. So try to wrap your head around this, but Candace Parker was actually voted Defensive Player of the Year in the WNBA, but somehow she was left off both all defensive teams. Doesn't really make sense to me. How's it possible that you're the Defensive Player of the Year, but you're not good enough to be on the all defensive team? So of course I had to look into that to see, one, if they were like the NBA, because the NBA has 2 defensive teams, I believe. So I was going to see, you know what? Maybe in some weird way they only had 1 defensive team and she somehow fell through, whatever. But they actually have 2 defensive teams like the NBA, and somehow she didn't make the team. So that's crazy to me. And then I start with that now to tie it in. Oh, also, she becomes the first WNBA or NBA player to ever be voted Defensive Player of the Year, but then not make an all defensive team. Yeah, so someone's going to have to explain that voting, but all right. So then, it's like I was about to say, to tie that into the NBA, I don't know if you remember, it was about a week or 2 ago, I believe, when the MVP vote came out, and most people understood Giannis was going to win the MVP, and then the vote came out, he won the MVP. I'm sure most of you remember that LeBron's response was that he was upset with how the voting went, because he only got 16 first place votes compared to Giannis getting like 81. And first reaction to me was like, really? I mean, we all knew he was going to win it, so what exactly could you be mad about? And then I thought about it a little bit, and I was like, is there any way that LeBron had any beef at all? And then looking at it, I'm like, not really. Because like I said, we all knew Giannis was getting the vote. So I don't understand what he could possibly have been surprised about. I mean, yeah, the margin might be a little wide, but I mean, as I said when he said it, okay, so you missed out on the MVP vote, but at least, you know, LeBron has a chance at a title. you look at Giannis is sitting at home watching it like the rest of us. So if LeBron were to go out and get a Finals MVP, that trumps a regular season MVP anyway, because that's what the MVP award is. It's a regular season award. I mean, the NBA, you can kind of guess who's going to be in the running for the MVP based off of the year, because it usually goes to the guy who puts up the more impressive stats. So, I mean, if you look at Giannis compared to LeBron, I know Giannis out-rebounded LeBron. I think points Giannis was a little higher, and then assists LeBron was higher. So it wasn't that far of a stretch to understand why Giannis won the award. So, just wanted to talk about those two things real quick. But on to the main reason for this episode, the NBA Finals. Like I said, Miami Heat versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Now the Heat's road to the finals, they took down the Pacers in the first round. Pacers were a little beat up, you know. Then the second round, they kind of shocked the NBA world when they took out Milwaukee, who everybody thought was the prohibitive favorite to make the finals. I mean, it was an impressive series. They were physical with Giannis and the Bucks, and they just couldn't respond. And then in the Eastern Conference Finals, they beat my Boston Celtics in 6 games to move on to the finals. So in this crazy 2020, the Miami Heat as the 5 seed ended up coming out of the East. When the playoffs started, I don't know how many people actually picked the Heat to come out of the East. Most people were thinking the Bucks or the Raptors, Celtics. Some even thought, if Philly could have beat Boston, then maybe they would do it. So Miami was a little bit of overlooked, but they had a great run in the playoffs. Gotta give them all the credit. And then looking on the West side, you have the Lakers, who they beat Portland in the first round. Portland came out of the seeding games and all that as the hottest team in the bubble. But the Lakers took care of them. I mean, they were a little beat up by then as well, but the Lakers did take care of business. And then after that, the Lakers took on Harden, Westbrook, and the Rockets. And the Rockets with their small ball was no match for the Lakers at all. They took care of Houston right away, which led to now there's changes going on in Houston. D'Antoni left. So all right. And then Western Conference Finals, they took on the Nuggets. The Nuggets are coming off their crowning achievement with beating the Clippers, messing up the LA versus LA Western Conference Finals. I mean, it was an entertaining series, but the Lakers prevailed in the end and beat them in 5 games. It was a hard-fought 5 games, but it was still a 5-game series. So now, looking at this matchup, I'll start with the Heat, as the Heat are the underdogs going into this series. My 3 keys for the Heat to have any chance of winning the series: if you move the ball around the perimeter, the Lakers do tend to get a little lazy with perimeter defense. And if you watch the Heat do have 3-point shooters that can kill you. So the Heat are going to have to definitely take advantage of that. Whether they do it based with Dragic kind of getting into the lane, and then having, it's usually like LeBron or AD kind of step up to close that down, kick it out to a guy in the corner, or back out at the top for an open 3. So I think if they work the Lakers defensively, they'll be able to get open shots. And if Hero, Robinson, and Dragic can be, I guess, as consistent from 3 as they were in the Celtics series, they'll give themselves a good chance. The second key for the Heat, they're going to have to control defensive rebounds. Because with AD, LeBron, then you have guys like Rondo who will crash the offensive board. Caruso when he's in there. Morris, guys like that. If the Heat can't keep those guys off the boards and give the Lakers second, third chances, then they're going to be in a world of trouble. Because usually off those second chances is when Miami's going to have to scramble to get back on defense. And then, not to say the Lakers are a great three-point shooting team, but they have some guys who can knock down threes when they're, wide open. So it's on those offensive rebounds where the Lakers look to, find Danny Green out on the perimeter or KCP on the perimeter or even AD. Because AD, for a big man, does shoot the three pretty well. So Miami has to control that. Third key for the Heat, they have to keep the Lakers out of transition. So by that I mean they need to take care of the basketball. Make sure that you force the Lakers to work hard on the offensive end to get any shots. Because if you've watched the Lakers, their half-court offense is average at best. They will go through stretches where they have no movement, and then guys are taking desperation shots, which would play right into the Heat's hands. So if they can take care of the ball, not have any silly turnovers or, shoot crazy shots that lead to long rebounds, and then you'll have guys like LeBron and AD trying to run out in front of the field and get easy baskets. The Heat can't have that. So those are my, three biggest keys for the Heat. Now we're going to look at the Lakers. So the Lakers coming in as the favorite. I mean, everything should be in their favor to win this series. If you look at them, of course, record-wise or whatever, you would say that the Lakers are the better team. But anyway, here are my three keys for the Lakers. So the first one is AD and LeBron have to dominate. It's plain and simple. I mean, the Lakers, they aren't that deep of a team. They'll usually go, outside the starters, a couple guys at the bench. Let's say like 7, maybe 8 deep, if that. And everything flows through AD and LeBron. So, I mean, the Lakers just need both of them to beat whoever is guarding them. For LeBron, if that's Jimmy Butler or Jay Crowder, then he's going to have to try to get them in foul trouble, or he may have to, work on the inside a little bit. Like, I would say LeBron should be able to, at least post up those two guys a couple of times a game at least. And then AD's going to have Adebayo on him. I don't see anybody else on Miami that would guard him. So AD's going to have to pull Adebayo away from the basket, because Adebayo is a great rim protector. And if AD can pull him away from the basket, that gives lanes to Rondo to get to the hoop, LeBron to get to the hoop, or like a KCP or Caruso to try to back cut and get open underneath the rim as well. And then with AD bringing Adebayo out on the perimeter, they have to control Adebayo on the glass as well, because Adebayo is very athletic. He's a guy who will go up for every defensive rebound. If he pulls it down, then Miami can get out and transition themselves. And then that way they can get their, kind of straggle three, where all their guys will run down court. The Lakers are forced to run back with them, and they can catch the trailer, get an open three, score that way. And then offensively, Adebayo does go for the offensive rebound as well, because he's a guy, he understands what he's good at and he understands his limitations. So he knows he's a high energy effort guy who can get on the glass. He can get, easy putbacks that way, or get the rebound, kick it back out for an open three, or they can reset their offense, kind of run it again, see what they get. The third key for the Lakers, now this one may actually be their biggest key, is they have to defend the three and then look to run. So the Heat, they have a lot of guys who will shoot three-pointers, Hero and Robinson mainly, as those two guys have the ultimate green light. If they feel like they can get their shot off, they have no problem taking them. And the Heat understand that, and they, let them do that. So, once again, with the perimeter defense of the Lakers, they'll sometimes give up open three-point shots. And this Miami team, if Robinson and Hero are on, you do not want to do that against them. So, I'm going to need their perimeter players to stick close to those two at least. Dragic, you do have to pay a little bit of attention to, because Dragic has a tendency to hit big threes late in the shot clock. So that's something to watch for. And then hopefully if they defend the three well, they can force long rebounds, which they have to control, and then get out and run. Because as we've seen in the playoffs, that's the Lakers' most consistent offenses. When they get out and run, they get easy hoops. And those are real backbreakers in terms of momentum. Like, just imagine you come down on offense, you run your set, you get an open shot or semi-open shot, you miss it, only for the other team to get a rebound and score on you real quick. And for a young team like Miami, it could be something that may, devastate them. I mean, we did see against the Celtics that they would get down and fight their way back. I would expect that as well with the Lakers, because as we've seen, Miami isn't a team that has any quit in them. But with the finals and a lot of guys from Miami haven't been in this situation, you never know how young players will react in a final situation. Oh, that does go for AD as well. This is his first finals, but AD's a veteran in the league, so he should be fine. So those are my keys for each team. But now I want to look at, key matchups. I did give you AD versus Adebayo already, based off the Laker key. But another matchup I do want to watch is, Dragic versus Rondo. Because we all know about playoff Rondo. As you're seeing, it is a thing. Rondo's just one of those guys who, when you get in the playoffs, he seems to elevate his play. I mean, not mad at him. You want to perform your best in the playoffs anyway. So, but the thing will be, if Rondo is on Dragic, which I expect him to be, then Rondo has to keep Dragic out of the paint, and Rondo can't give Dragic the open three, because Dragic will hit him. He has to force Dragic to, force him to be stationary out in the perimeter. Because even when Dragic doesn't have the ball, he will use his, craftiness to kind of get behind the defense and try to steal a hoop or two around the rim. And then on the other end, if Dragic is on Rondo, Dragic is like 35 years old. I don't have to say Rondo's like 25 or anything, but I think that can be a matchup that if Rondo is severely outplaying Dragic, then that can probably tell you the story for the rest of the series. That would be a big problem for Miami. Because as it's going right now, Miami would want Dragic to probably punish Rondo on offense through the three and getting into the lane. Because, don't like mess up what I'm saying here, Rondo was a very good defensive player when he was with the Celtics. He still plays decent defense, but he's not the same defensive player. So you can get around him. But Rondo does have like long arms, so when you do get around him, you just have to make sure you have ball security. Otherwise, Rondo will knock it away from you from behind, and then that leads to them getting easy buckets on the other end. So another matchup that's interesting to me is whoever Jimmy Butler is guarding. Like, I would think in a series like this, Butler will take the challenge of guarding LeBron. And I don't know how many of you remember, but when the playoffs first started, I think I talked about Jimmy Butler as a guy who, if he could lead Miami to a finals appearance or even a title, what exactly would that do for him in terms of ranking in the NBA? So based off of the Eastern Conference Finals, I would say nothing really changed because Jimmy Butler didn't really show me anything in that series. That series was won behind Hero Robinson, and Adebayo. Those are the three keys for Miami. So in this series, if, let's say, Butler can kind of contain LeBron and make LeBron a non-factor, not saying that's possible, but if he can reduce LeBron's impact on this series, then maybe Butler can elevate himself a little bit. But also with that, I do think Butler needs to be more of a presence offensively in this series for sure. Because Butler has a tendency to kind of defer and disappear offensively for like the first 3 quarters and then look to do things by the 4th quarter. But in this series, if they're down and momentum isn't on their side by the 4th quarter, that point it may be too late. So I would want to see Butler come out from the opening tip and kind of make a mark on each game. At least let it be known that he's on the court offensively. So I guess looking at X factors for each team, I would say my X factor for the Heat might be Iguodala again. Iguodala, as we saw in the Celtics series, he's a veteran presence on this team. Now, he did have that one game against the Celtics where he hit like 4-5 threes. I'm not expecting him to do that every game. But I think there will be a moment at some point in at least 2 of these games where he may be left open for a big 3, or he may have to come up with a big defensive stand against somebody. And if he can be successful in a lot of those situations, that will go a long way for the Heat. X factor for the Lakers would be, I think I'm going to cheat on this one, go with 2 guys. Danny Green and KCP. Those 2 are the 2 players that, Laker fans will look to be their outside presence. Because if they aren't hitting their threes, or at least perimeter shots, like, long 2-point shots as well, then that's going to give Miami's defense the thought that they can sag in the lane, try to push AD to the perimeter, and just keep LeBron out of the paint. And if it comes to that, that gives Miami a good chance as well. Because I'm sure Miami at some point is going to play their 2-3 zone. And what happens from the 2-3 zone? Yes, of course you'd like to get to the hoop each time down the floor. But there may be a couple of times where you kick it into the middle of the zone, you bring guys from the side into W, and you have to kick it out to a guy in the corner, which for the Lakers for the most point would probably be Danny Green or KCP. If they can shoot a well enough percentage from outside, then that's just going to open up the floor for the Lakers even more and make it easier for them to take this whole thing. So there you go. Gave you the keys, each team, X Factor, the matchups I'm looking for. I guess the last point we'll look at are the coaches. Now we have Frank Vogel for the Lakers. It's his first time to the finals. Spoelstra with the Heat has been to the finals before. That was back when LeBron was there with Wade and Bosh. Spoelstra didn't really get a lot of the credit for those teams because, it was looked at as LeBron was the coach on the court, and Spoelstra was still a young guy who worked his way through the Heat organization. He started off as like a video editor and became a coach because Pat Riley really liked him and all that. So for each coach, winning this series will go a long way for them. For Vogel, it'd be his first title, so that's always a big deal. For Spoelstra, it'll be his first title without LeBron. Yeah, because Spoelstra wasn't the coach when Wade and Shaq won the title. That was Stan Van Gundy. So yeah, this would be Spoelstra's first title without LeBron in Miami. So definitely will help him as well. So I guess with all that, you break all that down. I guess at this point, the only thing left is to give a prediction for the series. I've been thinking about this one because there's like two schools of thought for me on this series. So being a Celtics fan, there's a part of me that's like, I guess root for the Heat. Because if you're going to lose in the finals, you might as well lose to the team that's going to win it all. Plus it's the Lakers, and it's that whole thing with the Celtics franchise having 17 titles. The Lakers franchise has 16. So if the Lakers win it, they tie the Celtics for 17. And then, it's kind of supposed to be my blood not to root for the Lakers. Boston, LA thing. But just looking at the matchups, I gotta go Lakers in 6. We'll see how that turns out because I think my previous predictions. Let's see. Yeah, I had the Celtics facing the Nuggets in the finals, and we saw how that turned out. I was wrong on both accounts, so we'll see. But yeah, I'll go Lakers in 6. Yeah, so that kind of. So there's the buzzer. That's my preview of the NBA Finals. So like I said, it's Wednesday night. I want to say 8:30, Game 1. So I know I'll be tuning in. Hopefully you tune in as well. And then the next episode, we will go back to the NFL, get you ready for Week 4 as we'll talk about the Thursday night matchup. Plus, if any other big stories happen between now and then, we'll touch on those as well. But yeah, so mainly will be get started for Week 4. But yeah, so just thanks for tuning in. First episode. Appreciate you giving it a listen. Hopefully you liked what you heard. If you did, definitely listen to previous episodes. As I say, podcast is on pretty much every platform for your podcast. So if you do find it, definitely give it a like, follow or subscribe. And as I always say, definitely be safe. And I'll catch you in the next episode. All right.